So, when you start alchemy, you are always to begin with a prayer. And I have a prayer for us today. This is from Über die Zauberkräfte der Natur from Munich, 1819. It was originally written by Karl von Eckartshausen, who passed in 1803, and this was translated by Jocelyn Goodwin. Why I chose this is because it does not evoke a specific religious deity. And in alchemy, that is ridiculously hard to find. Hail, pure, moving source, O form pure for receiving the light. The light of all things unites itself with thee alone. Most blessed art thou among all receptive forms, and blessed is the fruit that thou conceivest. The essence of light united with warm substance. Pure form, mother of the most perfect being, lift thyself up to the light for us, now as we toil and in the hour when we complete the work. Alchemy. Been around forever. How many people here have used a double boiler? Okay, congratulations, you've used the first piece of alchemical equipment that we have records of being invented. That goes back, if you read my piece in the program, to Miriam the Jewess, which meant a woman probably of Hebrew Jewish culture. She would have been educated. Records writing about her were from the 4th century AD, and they don't really say exactly when before then she existed. But we do know it was before gentlemen began writing about her, and her great invention was what the French still called the bain-marie, the double boiler. They only had open fire, and putting a pot of water over it and putting a second pot on top in which you actually did the cooking was groundbreaking science. It suddenly allowed a cooking fire to be controlled finely. But who was the second woman alchemist? Alchemy doesn't have an answer to this. Some people say Hildegard of Bingen, but by then we're already in the 10th century. And other people will name women in the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s. That first woman out of the gate was the tall poppy. And it was almost like women began being erased from alchemy right away because a woman did something first. Women actually doing things today, groundbreaking in fields, will say, I recognize that scenario exactly. You sort of get credit, and then this wave of other humans comes in. I'm not going to be talking about lost women today. I'm going to be talking about alchemy. Are my images just after this? Because this is not me. So what I'm going to offer today is a different way that I've been working with the alchemical phases. Normally there are 7, and they go sort of in one specific order. And for years I worked with a community where it was just calcination through coagula, you're 7, you go around, you kind of go around. And it didn't feel complete to me. And talking at one point with people who were leading in the community, somebody was like, oh, well, that's just kind of implied. And I thought, well, if you're just implying it, you're not actually teaching it. And of course, one of the most radical things you can do in alchemy is actually teach people instead of trying to completely obscure the info. But part of the reason is, and this is very much a focus of the male world of alchemy, is the alchemist was pursued by the government. The government wanted the alchemist to make money. The money was for armies. And for a couple thousand years, that's really been the underlying kind of conflict function of alchemy in greater society. That's what greater society wants alchemy to do. And a bunch of people played with that and done other things and hidden it. And in the end, I think we need to just kind of step away from the old processes, use the same metaphors and formulas, but use them for the 21st century. And I think of what I'm going to say here, which is 9 phases, with the 2 kind of implied ones put out there, obviously, is how I've been going through alchemy, and it has just taken me on this incredible journey. That's part of how it got me to saffron, and that's a whole other thing. So, calcinatio, calcination, the beginning of the nigredo and the blackening, burning to ash. That's the first chakra, that's Saturn, that's lead. You hear a lot of people like, oh yeah, I'm having trouble at my job, it's like my lead. No, this is survival. This is what Dolores was talking about. That's what that first chakra is. Are you going to live through this? Are you going to not live through this? Stay calm and fuck civility. The number 1 disempowerer of women is, you gotta be polite. The entire reason my family is still alive and as privileged as we are in America is because both sides of the family engaged in incredible performative whiteness. Both sides of my family are immigrants. Both sides were Caucasian-colored ancestors. On one side of the family, I'm pretty sure it was the traveling across continents and multiple countries, changing your name in every country, that made them lighter. But silence, and it comes heavily on the female side of the family, where there was a whole family of girls. Yes, it's not fair, but we're going to be quiet and we're going to get along and we'll somehow get through it. The 21st century is not about being quiet and trying to, it may be about minimizing damage, but it's not about secretly minimizing damage. Get out in the open. Do not let them come for you. Right now in my country, as a woman, as a cultural Jew, and as gender nonconforming, and as a pagan, literally, people would like to kill me. They don't feel I have the right to exist. They don't believe I'm white. But you know, my tattoo artist will tell you that I am. They'll say, you are the fabulous white that we can put any color on. They can put white tattoo ink on me and it will show up. Not everybody gets that. But yeah, is it your survival? Do not be silent when it comes to your survival. Next, please. Disillusion. This is normally where you take the ash, you mix it in water, you're starting the solve, the coming apart. This relates often to Jupiter, communication, things like that. The way I'm looking at this, we need radical honesty. We need the breaking of illusion. If we're going to dissolve things away, we have to be able to talk about what's happening. I run around in America saying, we're going fascist. People go, no, we're not. You don't think concentration camps full of just children isn't fascism? I'll be honest, none of my neighbors want to talk about this in where I live, and a couple ladies down the street are really into it and feel they deserve it. And these are 2 grandmothers, one of whom will die if the government cuts off all her health care because she's been battling cancer forever. And the other one who is clearly ethnically from somewhere else. And they're totally into it. So that's what I mean, radical honesty and breaking of illusion. If you must break with people to stand in truth, get some distance. Be honest with yourself about things. It will help you with number 1. The survival, those lower chakras. All this layers on itself. Next, please. Separatio. Separation. We're up to Mars. We're up to that 3rd chakra. I often think of this as that what is really working here and not working here. And the way I look at this, outdisce, outdecide. Either learn or leave. Politically, both our countries, Britain and America, are caught up in these like power swings, but the arguments around trying to change everything back just like isn't working. And everybody's baiting each other into these conversations that aren't effectively moving anything. And it's allowing sort of what we don't want to happen to happen. Part of it is, the way I look at it is we're putting resources into things. And these people keep trying to sort of win these arguments. But at no point are they saying, wow, my resources and my argument aren't getting me anywhere. It's more like a shouting match, especially in America with so much of the internet. Whoever shouts the loudest, the longest, wins. So with this, we don't have resources to throw at issues. We don't have fuel to burn. We don't have water to pour down the drain. We don't have all the time in the world. We have to cut what isn't working. For the alchemist, this is the part after you've dissolved everything and sort of looked at it, often you filter what you have. Because some of it is now dross. It is the waste. It is sometimes called feces. It's the part that just, it's not good and it doesn't work for the experiment going forward. And that's where, instead of, well, I'll convince them. Have you changed the argument enough that it's really different from what you were trying before? If you can't convince this one person, can you stop trying to convince them and try something else to shift the scenario? We sort of do the same thing over and over again as humans. We like patterns. It worked once before, we'll automatically try it again. All the stuff we're facing, we're going to have to get more creative. We're going to have to try more things. We're going to have to recognize more quickly we're not getting anywhere. Next, please. Conjunction, fourth chakra, Venus. This is often where everyone talks about the lesser work. You've sort of separated, and this is where you do your first recombination of things. And I look at this and the heart work, and especially for women, my, me, and mine. And when I first wrote this down at home, it was I am my body. I own me. And then I wrote, I am not a data mine, which is a different take on the word M-I-N-E. We are not a resource. The world looks at us as sort of a resource to be consumed now. As women, can we finally love ourselves enough to have control over our own lives and bodies? Because where I'm living right now, that we suddenly now have 7 states. Like in the last week, 3 more states have outlawed abortion. This is abortion with no exception. And to have abortion with only exception for rape and incest is, of course, stupid and cruel and unusual and inappropriate anyway. But the point is, it's the 21st century, and we're being told we can't make our own decisions. We have to open this chakra. We have to work the alchemy. If we don't love ourselves enough, how are we going to survive? It's where you kind of have to open that first chakra really wide and want to survive to get enough energy up here to get to that point where you can hold it in the face of all this crazy stuff. Fermentation. Next, please. This fermentation goes all kinds of ways in alchemy. It depends what you're doing. And I was thinking, okay, we've got people here. This is for your training montage sequence as an alchemist. Because I wanted to talk to people always like, well, how do you really be an alchemist? There's all kinds of ways, but to me, this would fix part of what I think is broken in us as magical practitioners, where we've lost touch with the elements. Part of why everything is out of control, I mean, we talk about honoring earth, air, fire, and water symbolically, but most of us do not work with any of these things physically. Doing these things is not doing alchemy, but if you were to do all these things, you would find yourself thinking like an alchemist because it would shift how you relate to earth, air, fire, and water. For people who don't want to have a laboratory and be making tinctures or putting metals through and fuming and doing all that stuff, here are real world skills that will nonetheless kind of cause that shift in you and let you look at these cycles and look at all these elements and put you directly in touch with them again. Because alchemists in the past, as proto-scientists, they knew everything. You might not be the glass blower, but you were trying to get a glass blower to build you a new vessel no one had ever blown before. You had to know enough about glass blowing to know if your glass blower was making good quality glass for you and could make this shape. You just needed someone who practiced it all the time, to do the actual crafting. The same thing with ingredients that were coming to you. You had to know about how certain things were produced so that when people brought you the stuff you needed for your experiments, you knew it was good quality. We have to kind of get back in touch with a bunch of that. And to me, fermenting ourselves is kind of a way to do it. Next, please. Distillation. This is like a more advanced form of separatio. Because again, it's making a discernment, distilling something. And the way I look at this, and the moon, and you look at sort of the intuition here, we've lost the ability to see the entire process. Usually what we see in the modern age is just the distillation. And we need, not just the law at the end where someone comes out and says, I think this would be a great law to pass. Who is putting the law forward? Who paid the lobbyists? What companies are supporting it or fighting it? The same thing with making a product. Oh, this is a great thing that does everything and you should all buy it. Where do the supplies come from? Who is making it? Are they paying their employees? We all love iPhones, but iPhones make terrible pollution. They're using tons of resources. They're making tons of electronic garbage. But it's like we're addicted to them and we don't think about the fact that Chinese workers throw themselves at a rate of 1 or 2 a week off the roof of the building where these phones get made. We don't look at that. We only look at the distillation and how that acts with us. And that's where I said, literally on here, we need to relearn how to look at the whole process from the start right down to the end item. Who is the person to really get the money? Because again, alchemy winds up being, in the impure kind of way, about money. I have a great Latin epigram for this one. Cave ab homine unius libri. Beware of anyone who has just one book. It's that distillation of well, how did you just get to this? And why is this the it? Next, coagulation. This is normally the completion of the great work where you've come up to the crown chakra, everything's coming together. It's where the red turns to gold, all that kind of fabulousness. To me, the true coagula here is ourselves as humans. Because we identify and split into all these little pieces. And every time you're fighting the powers that be, if you are just the gay humans, you have to come up with your mailing list, your fundraising, your support, your activism. And then right next to it are people who are a little different. Maybe it's an ethnic group, and they're fighting for certain things, and they have to have their own mailing list and their own fundraising and their own whatever. And we get floods of emails where everyone wants donations. Something big happens over the weekend. You open up your email Monday morning, and 6 different groups that you support all kind of want help. To me, the coagula is we need to understand that we have the distinction of women's rights, gay rights, ethnic minorities, but we have to coalesce to just fight for human rights. If we were a coalition of disenfranchised minority interests going up against the people currently in power, things would shift better. And they keep us in our separate jewels. All of our little communities. And that's how I look at the coagula here. And the full quote, and this is from Mary Ann Atwood, a British alchemist who's been my muse in this. Her father burnt her book after he published it. Then he read it. And then he made her get all the copies back and made her burn them with him. The quote from her is, "Yet as colors, blue, red, yellow, and purple, are blended in the one uniform solar light, so it is said to be with the alchemical Pan, who, being one himself, is in his offspring multitudinous and manifold in every diversity of form, hue, and complexion." Marianne Atwood was the woman alchemist of the 1850s who certain modern alchemists say really created inner alchemy and took it from the lab to this thing where we're purifying ourselves. But because her book was burnt, although not completely lost, that's how I have a copy this, in the modern age. But that's how she's obscure, and people don't know who she is. She was literally erased. Okay, next, multiplication. This is where we're off the regular 7. This is the part that's usually implied that I think we need to teach people openly. There's some alchemy heresy for you. Multiplication. This is the stage where you learn to alter, amplify, and essentially hack the operating system for the Philosopher's Stone that you just coagulated in the last phase. To me, this can be an increase in the stone, and you kind of analyze it and decide what you're really doing there. And this, to me, is where it went really inner. It's sort of where you take the accounting. Is the experiment I'm doing working overall? The full quote, of which this piece up here is a little bit, is also from Marianne Atwood, and is that also is of use in solving riddles and enigmatical writings. For if you burn with a great desire of knowing them, that is prayer. And when you incline your mind to this or that, variously discussing and meditating many things, this is cooperation. That your prayer may not be, for want of exertion, a tempting of God, yet all endeavor is vain until you find the solution. Nevertheless, if you despair not, but instantly persist in desire and cease not from labor, at length, in a moment, the solution will fall in. This is a revelation, which you cannot receive unless you pray with great desire and labor, using your utmost endeavor, and yet you cannot perceive how from all those things of which you thought, which were not the solution of the enigma, the solution itself arose. She's basically saying, if you study something, that can be a prayer. That's really that inner alchemy thing, that anything can be this spiritual uplifting and you can work on it. Next, please. And this is the last one, projection. This is the phase where actually purified Philosopher's Stone is then thrown onto fresh prima materia, which is sort of raw, totally unrefined something, or a lesser refined material to start a new transformation. This is where the Ouroboros snake has come around and is biting its tail. That moment when the end of the alchemical process flips back and you start over again. And to me, for projection, this is about intention, education, and community. When you are projecting, you don't just fling your Philosopher's Stone anywhere. Have a purpose. Have it aligned with your higher, whatever you work with, because that's the point. Education. To me, that's a beautiful projection, where you are teaching others, where you are sharing your info, instead of alchemists being like, oh no, I totally got my thing over here and I'm not sharing it with anybody and I'm going to write it in code. In the end, that hasn't helped women. That hasn't helped the world. Yes, it may save you from getting killed by the king if you're really making gold and he wants it for the army, but we kind of understand that alchemy is not doing that anymore. Yes, you can turn lead into gold in a particle accelerator, but you can't do it in your kitchen. So let's look at what's really happening. And then community, alchemy is so isolating. I really think we do need to just stop hiding in the woods, in the hut. I mean, yes, okay, sometimes you do it because what you're doing smells horrible. But the whole fact of connecting intentionally, of making that loop back around and not sort of Oh yeah, it was implied and we're sort of starting over. Know when you're starting over. Know why you're starting over. Know how you're starting over if you're doing these alchemical processes that do repeat on each other. And to me, you can look at this as a spell or a prayer or an experiment, because at this point in alchemy, all three are the same to me. They really don't separate. And the trick is, we've been trying to change men for a couple thousand years, or the world, and that hasn't quite done it. And that's where we really need to turn alchemy back on ourselves. And I'm going to end with one last quote from Marianne. And the whole secret of this discovery, it would seem, consists in the sanguinary circulation of the vital spirit, in which there is a threefold law, as before explained, which has to be revolutionized also in 3 periods. That's how I got the 9. Called by the alchemists for certain accurate reason: altitude, latitude, and profundity. Altitude and profundity, being united at their extreme poles, make latitude. And so the wheel of life is turned about. The profundity is the subjective life, the water that is below. The altitude is the objective light, the ether that is above, and the conflux of these two is in a calx, out of which, as from a rocky fountain, the physical tetractus springs through the contrite experience into life with attributes prolific and enduring fruits. Actually, I was working with the 9 before I got that quote. But, and that's part of why I think of it as witches' alchemy. We have 3 threes, very stable. So, experiment, pray, do spells, change yourself.